What's up, everyone? Welcome to the 2022 DFS Army NASCAR season preview. Let's do this. Need a little NASCAR. We need like a little NASCAR specific opener for the shows.
Football's all over the place.
Gonna get that made. But all right, what's up, everyone? Welcome back. Couldn't be more excited. I've got Brady and Taco with me, DFS Army Pros for NASCAR, and we're gonna talk about the 2022 season. This is an intro, so we're gonna go over what's new, what to expect, what we have at DFS Army in terms of tools to help you dominate this year, and of course, just what to expect this overall season. Everybody knows, it's well known that DFS Army's NASCAR coverage is the best in the DFS industry. We put together more winners than any other site, and it's because of guys like Brady and Taco. What's going on, Brady? What's going on, Taco?
Living the dream, brother. Can't wait to be back working on NASCAR again. Like we were just saying, it's the shortest off season in sports, I think, but it feels like ages since we've done this. So.
It really does. But part of it's because I kind of ignore NASCAR when football season comes.
Yeah, I haven't talked to you since Homestead last year. Yeah. So like,
so for me, it ends in late August. Like, wait, does NASCAR continue past August? Are you telling me that it goes into September?
They actually have a playoff and everything. It's crazy.
I was in it. Weren't we in the I was in the championship this year.
Yes, sir.
I was in the NASCAR King of the Wheel or King of the
Beach,
King of the Road,
King of the
Road. Yeah.
Oh man, I made a last minute change that killed me in the King of the Road. I had Bush, so don't get me started on that.
They'll do better this year. Don't worry.
I will be in the King of the Road, and I love the opening races, guys. But I want to go over. We were just talking off air, so the whole idea of this podcast today is a season intro. Let's go. What to expect. What we've got going on at DFS Army, what has changed since last season for NASCAR? And you guys were just kind of blowing up my mind here with some massive changes. Taco, I believe you said it is the
biggest change that NASCAR has ever seen. So this is going on the 7th generation of car. And from generation to generation, there's always been some similarities to the car before. Even the dreaded car of tomorrow that's focused on safety after Dale Sr.'s unfortunate passing. Even that had some semblance to what the car before it was. This is a complete overhaul. Almost every part on the car is brand new from the ground up. And NASCAR is going all in with this. There's no going back. So they're taking a big gamble here. And we'll talk more about the car in a bit here. But
Brady,
it's a complete reset for everything.
This being a brand new car. So one of the things I recall from last season, and now I'm going to assume when you're saying it's a new car, that it's going to be a new car for plate racing, that it's a new car for like 750 cc and all the different horsepower versions. They're all completely different.
Yeah, we'll go over. I can go over like part by part. This kind of changed in the car.
I don't know.
I don't know if you want to do this now.
No.
Oh, it's really important, actually.
Is it? All right. So give me a breakdown of what are some of the changes here.
Okay, so overall, they're trying to make this car more like a car that you see and can buy. It's like they're trying to advertise as like made in Detroit. You can purchase one right now. Kind of, race on Sunday, buy on Monday kind of deal. But there's no going back. Overall, going more towards handling based road style car. I think they're looking at F1, how good F1 is doing. They're taking a lot of the things from there. Like we're going to a wing spoiler from a what was it that we had? I forget what it was called, like a hook or something that we had now. The horsepower last season we had the 550 horsepower package, 750 horsepower package for short tracks. Right now the number they're looking at, this has kind of changed a lot, but looks like we're going at 670 horsepower for this season at all tracks except super speedways, which will run at 510 horsepower. That's the numbers they've reeled in. This car is gonna be focused on a crap ton of downforce, and because of all the downforce, like we increase the horsepower a lot. Like these things can really go. The wheel is a huge change. So most people already know there's like the there's going to be a single lug, and it's because we're going from steel wheels to aluminum wheels. They're
Wait,
larger.
hold up a second.
Yeah.
Hold up. You just said, did I just hear this correctly?
Mm-hmm.
So a single lug nut? So no more. Is this going to be?
There's no more.
It's because we're going to forged aluminum tires, and those cannot handle 5 lugs. These tires they have a much higher chance of failure with that system. So we're looking at a single lug, and you know the dreaded feeling of, oh, your guy's a loose lug, he has to go back. That variance is going to be severely diminished. Like, a lot of these changes are going to be in the long term, probably not initially because of all the changes, all the adjusting teams have to do. But in the long term, there should be a lot less variance. Like, there's like an indicator now, like a visual indicator of whether or not your lug nut is sealed on. So no more your guy going back for a loose lug. I think that'll be a thing of the past, honestly. And with these tires, like, the tire is such a huge change for the drivers because it's so much bigger, and the sidewall of the tire it's smaller, which means teams are going to have a lot more input on their suspension setup, and there's going to be more grip in these tires overall. The drivers handling, like their skill when it comes to handling the car is going to be, they're going to be able to express that a lot more with these cars. So driver skill overall is something that's going to be severely boosted, and I think that the teams, right? All the teams, you have the bad teams that are significantly worse than the good teams. We're going to see teams across the board, especially initially, just come way closer, become way more competitive.
Brady, I want to touch on this because you mentioned this before we went on the air about competitiveness, and Taco, you just brought that back up. So the price of the car is cheaper, and therefore the lesser teams can be more competitive. Give me an idea of really, like,
and also, like, driver skill is going to be way more expressive in this car over just like money being dumped into better parts. So if you're a good driver, you're going to be able to express that skill more than you have in the past.
Like,
in theory,
I'm trying to translate this to the DFS edge and the betting edge too, right? So you're saying now we can rely on these guys who are known as great drivers but have been driving crappy cars for a long time, maybe to start actually being competitive. Is that
yes, instead of just the top like 4 teams just dominating everything. And there's so many new things with this car too. There's this new rear diffuser, which is a series of vents along the rear of the car, which helps, it helps air escape from the car, but also controls the speed and basically the wake of the car's leaves. And the main focus with that change is they're trying to reduce dirty air. So they're trying to make it a lot easier to pass the leader. We're not sure if that'll actually be a thing, but a lot of these changes are meant to add more parity. They really don't want a leader sitting in front for 400 laps, because they're just sitting in clean air. That's something they've really attacked with this car.
I mean, those races that race style is way more boring. So you could tell last year that even just adding a bunch of road races and dirt tracks and shit like that, there was a definite effort on the part of NASCAR to make things a little more fun. And I think the dirt track is the ultimate. And they're trying everything to do this.
Biggest gimmick I've ever seen, maybe.
But I mean, they're trying
dirt on it.
I'll add really quick on the competitiveness. It's a full reset for everyone. So everybody's starting on a level playing field. So initially, these cars will be a lot more competitive. But Geek, if I give you $20 and I have $5 and we race to see who can buy the most apples, you're going to have more apples than me at the end of the day. So as time goes on, the skill gap is going to widen and widen. And by the end of the year, the teams that we know are well funded and well operating are going to start to have an advantage over the smaller teams who just run out of resources by mid-season and are kind of stuck where they are.
Unless they start winning, the small teams, and all of a sudden they get money.
Winning fixes everything.
Yeah.
But it's going to be more competitive to start. But a team, it's like we said before going on air, on the last car, Roush and RCR are as well funded as Gibbs and Hendrick and Penske. It's just Gibbs and Hendrick and Penske got ahead on that car. So it's a full reset, and now Roush might get ahead and Hendrick falls behind. But the cream's going to rise to the top. Maybe it's, later in the year, or maybe it's next year, or maybe it's 3 years from now, but that skill gap will reappear. So don't fall in love with it.
I love it. I think I like a whole lot of new stuff. So another change for this year, and maybe these two things go together a little bit, is we're going to get practice time and we're going to get qualifying for almost every race, including trucks and Xfinity. By the way, are trucks and Xfinity using these new vehicles also, or is this specifically a Cup Series thing?
Just
let me answer that. It's just
Cup
Cup Series. Okay,
Truck
so
and Xfinity aren't really messed with.
No change there. But all right, so we'll have our normal Xfinity and Cups and truck, but it's the Cup Series that changes now. Practice and qualifying. And I want to go to both of you. I'll start with Brady and then Taco. We haven't seen a lot of qualifying in the last 2 years. We haven't really seen practice almost at all in the last 2 years, 2 seasons of NASCAR. So let's go back to when we had it. First of all, how predictive do we think that practice and qualifying times really are? Like, Brady, what's your take on the predictiveness of those statistics that we get?
I think if we go back to 2019, they are somewhat predictive, but you have to be looking at the right number from practice. I think a lot of people back then looked at single lap time. They looked at 5 lap time, but there's so much context. Like, what were they in a short run package? Were they, running a long run? Were they in qualifying trim? Like, there's so much context to practice, and a lot of that context is going to be lost because practice now is like 15 minutes. So you're not even going to have
right
time
before qualifying too. So
yeah, so it's just going to be like a pre-qualifying run. You're not going to have time to go out, try something, change the trim, make adjustments, try again. So in 2019, to answer your questions, I think there was definitely some predictive attributes, but I think we're going to lose a lot of that with the shorter practice time. And I think practice now will just be kind of more of a shakedown. Like, let's go run 3 laps, make sure the roof doesn't fly off. And if it doesn't, we're racing with what we got.
We'll feel good about it. Okay.
And early on the season, like right now, dealing with like a part shortage across the board. A lot of teams are going to be scared to do much in practice or really try too hard because they're so scared of messing up their car.
Yeah, you mentioned there's an issue with a lack of parts for these vehicles where any sort of thing goes wrong and you're not replacing a part, you're done. So
yeah,
that's a little bit scary. Now, one thing I want to talk about with the practice coming in is one of the edges. One of the edges I think DFS Army has is just how manually we do our stuff, to where, we're even in these half an hour and 45-minute turnarounds between qualifying and race time, we are racing to get projections out on the domination station for trucks races that are happening within 30, 40 minutes. Taco going crazy, typing away, making it happen. You ever see that cat that just does that? It's a meme.
Oh, yeah.
It's a meme. So I think that's one of the edges that we can potentially have this season, just being aware and very quickly able to customize projections right after a practice or right after a qualifying run and be like, all right, we got a race in 30 minutes. Let's fucking go.
Also, so lap by lap data from like practice and stuff is going to be super helpful because it helps you identify oh, hey, this guy's clearly in qualifying trim. This is what he actually looks like in runs.
Yeah, there's so much context to that stuff for those quick turnarounds. It's akin to like NBA. You guys deal with this every night in the other sports. A guy's sitting or a guy's out. What's the context of him? Who sees more minutes? Who sees less minutes? Who's going to get more looks at the basket? Like, there's that kind of context in NASCAR that you have to be able to translate in these like short windows. And it's something that the team here has gotten really good at.
Yep.
Yeah.
The shorter the window, the better the edge. And we'll have a lot of these, starting with the Clash, we'll have a lot of these super quick heat race based turnarounds. I've always made the most money in those. So say send it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love what you just said. The short guys, and listen up. As you're writing in, you're a subscriber of DFS Army, right? And it's 2 hours before the race. Qualifying hasn't happened yet. And you're angrily typing your message. Where's the projections for this race? I pay good money for NASCAR. Like, as you're typing that, remember this. The shorter the turnaround, the greater the edge. Patience. Just wait a moment. Patience. Let the qualifying happen. Give it 5-10 minutes. Projections will populate, and you will have an edge. Because we could throw up crapola projections that don't have qualifying. When all of the sites grade place differential above almost all other statistics. So you'd have terrible projections because what without knowing where to start, you can't project it, right?
Yeah.
So patience. So the key to waiting and being patient is reserving lineups and knowing how to quickly edit your lineups. Obviously, we have tutorials for that if you don't already do it. If you're new to DFS or you never used an optimizer, we have tutorials for that. But that is the way. This is the way. This is the way.
And honestly, with this new generation of car, as teams get used to things, the initial frustration, we get past that. Honestly, a lot of the times what screws us over is these just random bits of variance, like I mentioned earlier, the loose lug nuts. And this new car really focuses on getting rid of those little things. Like there's going to be no more, like say, wheel hop at road courses. There's going to be no more, like not no more, but significantly less brake failures because they can use a much larger brake disc in these bigger wheels, which will, how many times have you had a guy's, you're watching the guy's tires glowing red at a short track and you're just like, please do not melt the beads. I mean, in theory, if this car goes the way that's supposed to, there should be a lot less of that absolute bullshit variance that we despise. And
there should be lots of I suspect there's be lots more spins and probably at the same number of like wrecks, but that catastrophic like variance, blown engines, tire failures, blown tires, that should largely be eliminated in theory. I mean,
and how many times do we see last year, the year before, things like a freaking ballast falling off or stuff that would be super obvious in like practice that we just had to deal with like lap one because they didn't have any practice time. So even though you may not be able to get like the super long run times and stuff in these really short practice, at least those things will take care of themselves. So
a little bit of peace of mind in an industry where there's little.
I mean, remember that's right. Jason remembers that crazy curve thingy, like that piece of metal that they put on that one road race that the cars were just tearing up their
Briscoe try to use as a ramp to jump over other cars.
Yeah, I mean that race was just I remember that it was just bananas. So getting into it, so this is really really exciting. So I prefer and I like lesser variance, especially when you want to go all in on certain value spots that seem super obvious, and then I like to go all in on those spots. And they invariably last season, I'll mention the name, he who must never be named, Eric Almirola, who started 30th.
Swan song season.
He started 30th or worse in 14 straight races last year, and either crashed or just some weird shit happened.
Where variance over and over and over.
And we kept saying, it's just
rarely
variance.
ever even his fault.
Chalk it up, variance. Yeah, at some point, that dude just I don't know what the hell was going on.
Less
but
variance, the better. The more predictable, the better.
Yeah. Now I love NASCAR. So being where I'm from, we didn't watch NASCAR in Brooklyn growing up. It wasn't a thing. I have no experience watching this sport prior to meeting Taco, to be quite honest. When in 2016, when you're like, oh, check out NASCAR. I do that too. I was like, what NASCAR exists in DFS?
I got so many people hooked, man.
Oh, how far we have come. So I love NASCAR season. This is what I do in the NFL offseason. So I want to talk about drivers. One of my favorite things to really focus on in a new season, drivers changing teams. And a big reason is because we get some better named DraftKings just doesn't tend to react to it. That's a big reason why I like to do it.
They're slow to react sometimes.
They are slow to react to Eric Jones is now on a shitty team, or Daniel Suarez is now in a nice car, and that kind of thing.
They also definitely use track history in their algorithm, which is and I assume they'll use like
the sports books do that
previous
too.
Year's data.
Horribly,
which is it's gonna be not right for a bit.
Not predictive at all.
Brady, you are like the master of noticing when the sports books are off with their numbers, and a lot of times these are a lot of things. So at the beginning of most seasons, we get like some Corey LaJoie type driver that all of a sudden's like, oh no, he's not in that piece of shit car. He's in like a slightly better car this year, so maybe he can, his punt level price point is inappropriate. So Who are
Absolutely.
the drivers this year, or are there any that have changed teams and are now either better or worse, or just vertically on a different team? So you guys mentioned Keselowski. Is he the biggest name team change?
Yeah,
I would say
either him or Kurt Busch, but those Keselowski and Rouse is huge. And I think for a while, I don't know if I'm pretty sure DraftKings and Sportsbook will, but people certainly will think that RCR and Roush are these like hard stuck mid tier teams, and that's really not the case. I think
you can see it already in the clash odds. If Keselowski was still with Penske, he would be like plus 1,000, plus 1,200. They've got him down at like plus 1,800 to plus 2,000. So they're already trying to price in this downgrade of Keselowski, which is probably not valid at all.
I'm looking at his salary, even in the clash. He's priced down.
Yeah.
And I believe wrongly so. Roush is very well funded. They share ownership with the same, like, it's Roush, Fenway, Keselowski, and the Fenway is the people that own the Boston Reds. Like, there's plenty of money.
Yeah.
There's lots of money, and Keselowski will get the most out of that money. So I think this is much more of a lateral move for Keselowski than I think people are giving it credit for. It's not a downgrade.
People look at Buescher being on the Roush team and look at the team and go, all right, that's one of the lower level teams.
Yeah,
even
absolutely.
Newman, just kind of coasting there in his retirement years.
But Keselowski would not go this is a lateral move. Keselowski knew what he was doing. He timed it the way he did for a reason. Like they're going to be competitive this year.
Love it. So now what I want to talk, are there any other driver moves? Keselowski the only one? Do we get moving to good, any of these turd guys?
There are actually several of these. So Kurt Busch going to 23XI with they had Bubba Wallace last season. Sort of like Trackhouse, another team that's on the rise, new team, backed by, of course, Hamlin, Michael Jordan. There's money in there, closely related to JGR. It's basically going to be
Busch is in the car that Bubba was in last year. No, Bubba's he's in that team too.
No, he's in a second car, and that team has 4 garages. Is built 4 garages, so we're expecting that to expand into a full team. Soon, who knows? They might be as big as JGR here soon, but it's about time we have another Toyota team. It's not like Truex. It's basically just JGR. So that's probably a really good move for him, honestly, because Chip Ganassi is no more. So Chastain, Kurt Busch to go somewhere. It was a really good move for Kurt Busch going to 23XI, and then we have. Speaking of money, Colleague Racing, who we've seen kind of beat up in Xfinity, flexing their cash about everywhere. They're making the big step up to Cup Series this year with Allmendinger and Justin Haley making their full season debut this year. With the season overall going more towards, we got 6 road courses again this season. With F1 being kind of a hit with the young people and NASCAR desperate to get new young fans. The sport's kind of moving more towards road course style, driver skill style tracks. And that's something that Allmendinger is going to be really good at. So he's definitely a name to have circled moving forward.
Quick note on that.
Yeah.
That's an all-star car too. So Allmendinger in for 16 races, Gregson for 14, Hemrick for 8, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So but Colleague Racing is running full-time with 2 full-time cars, 1 all-star car, and 1 full-time with Justin Haley.
You think the Justin Haley car will be because Justin Haley is essentially looked at as the turdliest of turds.
Who's Inspire Motorsports car, which is just kind of turdly.
I believe Justin Haley will be incredibly competitive on plate tracks. I legitimately believe he's probably one of the better plate drivers in the series, like in any series.
Oh, there's no doubt at this point.
Well, that means we're going to be experiencing some Justin Haley goodness right at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, back when they released odds, it's gone now, but they had William Hill and Caesars posted him at plus 15,000, and I gobbled all that up I could, and so it was all off. It's down to close to plus 4,000 now, which is more correct, but he'll be competitive. The other tracks, I don't think Colleague will be super competitive right off the bat. I think there'll be some growing pains, especially when
it'll take some time, yeah.
A rookie team with a rookie driver. Like, it's just going to take some time, but new team that that has some money behind them. So
awesome.
And then we've got Harrison Burton making his debut. We know him from Xfinity. make his debut with the Wood Bros. He'd be replacing Matt DiBenedetto. Matt DiBenedetto is going to the Rackley WAR team in the Truck Series. We saw Peters and Josh Berry kind of split time in that last season. The best finish had was like 10th. So big downgrade for DiBenedetto, but you know, he can only finish second so many times in a row. Poor guy never got his win. Hope to see him back in the Cup Series.
I did not think he was a bad driver at all. I'm surprised. Obviously, NASCAR is a little less of a meritocracy than it probably should be, because I felt like DiBenedetto is probably a better driver than a couple of guys who are still driving in the Cup Series. But that's
I just don't think he's better than Harrison Burton, though. Also, his last name definitely helps a lot.
It helps when your dad's in the booth.
Yeah,
that does help. All
right,
so let's talk about
the changes. Well, there's still just a few more changes that are made. Chastain going to Trackhouse Racing. We saw their debut last season with Suarez. It's another team that's kind of on the come up here. So
it's Chip Ganassi.
Yeah,
it's
renamed,
the same team.
But
yep.
So you got Suarez and Chastain. Now, what was Chastain last year?
He was with Chip Ganassi last year.
Okay.
So Trackhouse bought Chip Ganassi Racing, made it and brought over Daniel Suarez and kept Ross Chastain.
Yep. And then
was pretty good last year, so hey, they couldn't have been that bad.
I think this is another team that'll take a bit of a step up this year. I think a lot of money behind that team, some good sponsors, and the new car should help them initially.
Then I think this is the third team that's added a second driver, but so Petty, which had Almirola and Bubba Wallace, and then eventually Eric Jones, they're adding another car and they're merging with GMS, who we know from the Truck Series and Xfinity. Ty Dillon will be back in the NASCAR Cup Series again, which is great. I love Ty Dillon.
Love Ty.
So he'll be teammates with Eric Jones there. And then Ryan Preece, love Ryan Preece, especially at like the short tracks and stuff. He's going to basically a backup spot at Stewart Haas Racing. And it's kind of bummed to not see him get like a full ride here, because he actually has like an edge on the field. Probably not like in the clash he's gonna be riding a Rick Ware Motorsports car. So that's pretty unfortunate. But like apparently the Welland Modified has ran really similar kind of cars as to what they're driving this season. And that's when he came out of Welland Modified. So pretty cool angle there. He could it's kind of expected those kind of guys would have an advantage over the field, at least initially. And less shitters on the track. I think there'll only be 2 Rick Ware cars out there instead of 4. So we're going to see, again, just more parity across the board. A lot more competition, a lot less lappers.
I think that's huge. I think that's huge for Stars and Scrubs approaches to NASCAR, which is how I tend to like to approach it. What I put on screen, guys, is the DFS Army NASCAR Research Station. And one of the things I love about this tool isn't just, of course, we love that you get all the details you need about the upcoming race here on the main page. So, and you got really great stuff here, Taco, in terms of having recently added in all the win odds, the drivers' results in the style of track. A lot of
don't look at these numbers too much. It's from a completely different car. Granted,
totally different.
At least for the class short track numbers are somewhat, these short track drivers, good short track drivers, but we're going to have to ease the numbers in this season and not focus on them nearly as much as we would. But I mean, looking at short flat track splits, probably the most helpful thing you can do at this point. There's just really not much to go off of yet until you start accumulating some data, and accumulating data will be really hard if you look at the schedule, because we're not going to see races that really help predict other races for a few months into the season, because we keep going, the schedule just has us going from different track type to different track type, from road courses to super speedways, Bristol, all that stuff is early on. So we're going to be kind of, I wouldn't say lost, but it's going to be really hard. I think people are going to overreact to some super small sample sizes early on.
I love
got to play it by ear as it goes, because who knows with this car.
I like that variance, but let's talk a little bit about the different ways like a general way that we're going to attack different race types, right? Because I think this is one of the most important and maybe mildly overlooked, but maybe not parts of just the approach to NASCAR in general. How you attack different races, right? And each one favors different type of cars, different type of drivers, and different approaches. A lot of it has to do with dominator points available and can you dominate. So we've got a super speedway extravaganza to open up the season, and super speedways are extremely unique. For those guys who are watching and this is your first time, a lot of people are watching this video going, I never played NASCAR, but it seems cool. How does it work? So I'll bring that perspective of I'm not a pro or an expert in NASCAR, but listen, I had to ask you, it's like simple rules. Like, what does this mean when the penalty? How does that happen? How do people? What's this wave around? Right? All these little things that you learn. But in terms of the rules of NASCAR, but the big one I learned was number one: super speedway cars are drafting, meaning they cannot use the full power, the vehicle's full engine power. Super speedways have long straightaways. Just picture like they're always 2.5 miles long for the most part. So you have these massive straightaways where if you gave the drivers the ability to go as fast as they could, it would be some of the highest speeds you've ever seen, and they would all pretty much just fly off on the turns.
They'd take flight.
Yeah, they would take flight at the end. So they realized, hey, if we're gonna put cars on these, it's funny. I thought Talladega and Daytona are what I thought all NASCAR was before I ever watched a race. I will tell you guys, you don't know.
Giant pack races with huge crashes.
Yeah, I figured they're all bunched together and have these awesome crashes, right? So what happens in super speedway is, number one, when you're in first place, when you're leading the pack, you need a bunch of cars behind you to create a draft so that you can hold position. The more cars in the line behind you, sort of the faster you go. And that's how they sort of jockey around first place. But the most important component is cars rarely lead for a very long period of time. And there's massive crashes because the cars need to bunch all together super, super close and tight, or they're done. And what that also leads to is extreme frustration, because if you got Denny Hamlin and he's in second place and he makes one of his trademark, let me drop out of the draft and try to just pass on the bottom on my own, and it doesn't work, boom, all of a sudden he goes from second to like 30th.
And he's back to 8th place 2 laps from there.
Very quickly. Makes his way back.
While collecting no fast laps along the way because they're being randomly distributed to whoever the fuck is in the back of the line. Yeah, I mean, it's its own kind of monster, you know?
It is, and it's so I love the super speedways because the entirety of your strategy is most of the cars are going to score the most points because they're not getting dominator points that much, and they're not getting, or you can't really know who's going to get fast lap points. The only thing you can really count on is, hey, if a guy starts really far back and he makes his way really far forward, he's going to get a lot of points, place differential points. So it's
always point to the example of Stenhouse. He started the race on the pole, led a significant amount of laps, won the race, not even close to the optimal. That's the kind of race that Daytona is.
With a win. That's how crazy it gets. But more often than not,
well, in FanDuel, that definitely went for you.
Yeah. So more often than not, though, it doesn't require the win. But you want, you're basically guessing who are going to be like the top 7 or 8 finishers in the race. And if you can guess, if you get the right 5, you're good. And hopefully they're coming from the back, they're scoring a ton of points if they start further back, and who can avoid crashing. So super speedway, all about who can avoid crashes. So let's talk about, and we have Daytona and Talladega are the 2 tracks that do that. Are there any other super speedways? It's just those 2.
They're trying to make Atlanta into one with this repave. That could be interesting, but I'll believe it when I see it as we get to there. They've done testing on it, but that was a few months ago. And at this point, they've already made so many changes to the car. Who knows? With repaves, it's always who knows.
All right. So the second most unique kind of track for me are road courses. Right. And then we'll get to the intermediates and the shorts and everything. But for me, the road course is the next most interesting style of track because it plays very unique. So, Brady, with a road course, what I found in the past is we just really need to look at which drivers are good at this style of driving. It's totally different from driving around an oval or a standard oval. You're turning left, you're turning right. It's much more of that F1 stuff you guys were talking about. So number one,
it's also been a giant clusterfuck as of late. These road courses.
They're not. I mean, anybody who's driven, if you've ever driven a go-kart at the mall, at the go-karts place, that's, you know, that reminds me of a road course. Like one car at a time. You're not really lining two up. You can't have two at a time. It's one at a time. There are ways to pass, but you know, the ways to pass are really tricky and you can always crash. And there's a lot of spin outs, little spin out, and you get back on the course. Like no big deal.
A lot of that garbage carnage at road courses recently, and trying to race on rain and stuff, wheel hops going flying, all sorts of.
I think at road courses, you have to consider you're much less racing the field and much more racing the track. It's lap time. It's literally who can get around this track 80 times the quickest. And there's drivers who are just naturally, whether it's because they started in open wheel cars or started on road courses, or they grew up with a road course down the road. There's just guys that are good at making lap time on road courses, and it's important to identify those people going into those weekends.
Yeah, I think a lot of track history and also just looking at, again, some of the stats we have, like driver rating in road courses will tell you, oh, Chase Elliott. Like, I just need to look real quick, and it's like, oh, well, Larson's good at everything, but Larson, really good at road courses. Okay.
We have Austin Cindric to add to this mix this year, too.
Yes.
Who is probably the best road course driver in my
That's what I'm talking about. Doesn't even show up.
Road courses and short tracks would be, especially road, like those are the ones that you can take the most long-term data from and apply it, because that's all just like driver skill. Intermediate tracks, super speedways, large tracks, those are not those are going to be the giant question marks this year, because when it comes to speed, who knows? But driver skills can really be expressed at road courses and short tracks.
But it's predictive. That's the beautiful part about it. You can go back and be like, oh, this guy has done well at road courses. Let's keep using him. So let's use that guy. Sometimes it's also tallied into their salaries, but other times it's not. So we'll have to see how that goes. But road courses being the second, you got your super speedways. Then for me, there's two more track types that we could really think about. One being, I'll stay away from intermediate course, which is like, generic cookie cutters. And I'll go to the short tracks. I like the short tracks too, the half a mile track.
It's kind of worth mentioning that, like, I think NASCAR overall is so after Dale Sr. died, they tried to make a whole bunch of they're really pushed for a bunch of intermediate kind of cookie cutter tracks. I think we're slowly working ourselves away from that being a majority of the schedule. I think those are going to shrink in size.
I'm happy.
Year to year.
I find those races less interesting, so I prefer that personally. I just, it's a personal thing. I find it a little less interesting, a little less exciting. These other courses, I can at least find some predictive stats like, oh, this guy's good at plate racing, or this guy's great at road courses. But intermediate's like, yeah, it's just, that's your standard average cookie cutter thing. But the short track is really interesting, the half mile, because dominator points are racked up in an insanely high fashion. Just like with the 2.5 mile course, you really don't get many points from leading or fast laps. On the short track, man, you start to see scores in the hundreds, 140, 130. Understanding the scoring systems for FanDuel versus DraftKings versus Super Draft. Let's not forget Super Draft. And also Prize Picks. Monkey Knife Fight. Those guys are jumping into NASCAR a little bit. We're going to talk about that. We're going to try to get some tools going for those sites. Right?
Prize Picks.
What if Prize Picks is still bad at super speedways?
What's this?
Prize Picks was very profitable last year.
Yes, because no one has projected
to play it. God damn.
We're getting down with some Prize Picks this year and some NASCAR. We're gonna match up our projections with what's going on.
What finishing position? That's it.
Over under. They set a line for the.
Yeah.
Seems
really easy.
It's very beatable, right?
Absolutely.
So, and especially when you have metrics, a lot of people are just guessing. That's the beautiful thing. We're not guessing. We're putting our numbers on it. But So I love the short tracks because, again, the drives rack up a lot of points. You always hear the same, oh, Kyle Busch is great at the short tracks, and, whatever. But if you could predict the lap leader, that's really key, or what we call the dominator. So on the short track, they are 1, 2, 3 dominator tracks where we're like, no, you can't like get too silly with these place differential guys. Don't even worry about place differential. What we want to get are guys who are going to lead, who are going to have lead laps. And if you can get 2 or 3 of them in the lineup together that lead most of the laps, then even if you throw a couple turds in there that just did okay, it doesn't matter as long as they allowed you to afford those dominators. So dominators are key to everything, but especially the short tracks because of how they run and how many points are available.
Now, actually, this season the short tracks dominator wise will be getting a slight nerf. Like I think Martinsville is going from 500 to 400 laps, which would put it equal with the Coke 600 as far as laps and dominators go.
Still a lot.
And with the new car, there's going to be, of course, more of an emphasis on team setup, driver skill, of course, like we've mentioned, and there's the new stronger fiber reinforced plastic body panels on the side of the car, which means these cars can take a lot more of a beating and banging than the previous generation of car. So guys like Tyler Reddick, who I'm quite bullish on, and kind of have been since he debuted, I think some of these more aggressive drivers, their stock will go up in the short tracks, especially with less like random variance and stuff like that. So it'll be something to keep your eye on for these short tracks.
I also like.
I wouldn't look at the Clash too much for this because I think the Clash is going to be an absolute shit show, and I wouldn't even like use that data for anything.
I almost want to warn people. I see everybody so excited in the comments. I'm watching them like I can't wait for Sunday. I'm like, let's wait for next Sunday. Like this Sunday is
even the Sunday after that.
Sundays from now,
yeah, like no, I love Daytona. Let's not knock
it. Duels.
Yeah, Brady. All right,
these are very much exhibition races. Definitely worth noting.
I will tell you something, Brady. I have deciphered over the years from you and your notes that you hate super speedways. Like yes. I can tell you do not like predicting anything about a super speedway. Is your take on super speedway that it's just not predictable and so you don't like it?
I don't think it's a fair representation of. This is going to sound very elitist, and I recognize I don't think it's a fair representation of the sport. I think it's more of a showcase. Like, let's line these boys up as fast as we can, make them go as quick as they can. Somebody will come out at the end, and then next week we can go back to real racing. I'm not a huge fan of plate racing. It's like, for me, it's a show. It's as much of an exhibition race as the other races, but it's enjoyable. It's entertaining.
I knew it.
When you're trying to make some money, it's tough.
I knew that I could tell by your notes for the years. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah,
it's almost the opposite for me. And it's not even like I think the super speedways kind of suck. Granted, I go to Dega every year and it's a fun experience, but mostly like for the off track stuff, because a lot of it's just kind of, I mean, it's intense knowing that like a big one could happen at any time. But like, honestly, from a spectator standpoint, most of the race is kind of, whatever, just straight line. There's no one actually leading. It's kind of random.
No, but
I just know that I've profited more money on that track type than any other track type. And at the end of the day, it's kind of what you're here for. So
for me,
I'm all about super speedways, all about predictable tracks like Richmond. Those are my favorites, because those are the ones you make the money on.
Where I struggle is, using data and analytics to predict races. I'm much like I use that stuff, but I'm much more rely on my knowledge of the sport and the goings on and how things move.
Well, I think NASCAR definitely is one of the sports where like these kind of anecdotal things actually just matter so much more.
Exactly, and those are harder to do on play tracks.
Yep.
I think that's a big part of the edge is we do look beyond just the data analytics and get into some areas that aren't necessarily obvious to the outside world. One of the cool things we've done in DFS Army is get the garage reports from last year and just getting the little words from the drivers to their, getting little reports on what the drivers would say to their teams or to their spotters, how they felt about the car before the races. I love that info.
With qualifying, we'll get I like listening to the scanners during qualifying, especially single car qualifying, because it's really easy to tell who's who. And sometimes you can get some really good tidbits of knowledge, especially in the lower series. With those drivers tend to be pretty honest and pretty vulgar when the car's not working right, and so that can oftentimes be an edge, especially if it's like a high-owned punt shitter driver, and you notice like last second something's wrong with the car. That's a huge edge.
Big time, and even more so outside of the Cup Series. When you're talking about real shitters, we're focusing mainly on Cup, but the reality is, listen, we're playing DFS, guys, and there's no difference to me between winning a Cup race or winning a truck, or money's money. I'm trying to win some tournaments, and I'm trying to win tournaments. And quite honestly, the biggest thing over the years that has caused difficulty in winning tournaments is just the variance of crashing. Right, like we'll very obviously know
mechanical things which they're aiming to fix, and penalties, which actually this year they overhauled the penalty system, and they're putting up some gigantic fines for like L3 penalties. They're going to be fines of $250,000 to $500,000 for the team. So it seems like they're really cracking down on a lot of the cheating that may happen. I'm not sure how effective it will be, but like, my God, some of these penalties look intense.
You put one penalty like that on Trackhouse, and they're out of business. Done. I'm out. Thank you. It's been a great year. We're done. 500K. We're out. So they're done. So
hopefully less cheating will be going on, or maybe one team will be really good at cheating, and we figure out who that is. Stuart Haas, and then they take that cheating away, and they get bad for a year. Stuart Haas.
There it is.
I don't know.
We're getting in the weeds now. Jeez.
Yeah, you're going back in time. We're at the beginning. But the last track type I want to talk about is the standard intermediate tracks. And that's the average race that you see in NASCAR every week. We see this go a lot of different ways. Most of the time, you get like a leader. They'll get out front, and they'll just hang out there for 200 laps. It's kind of boring. And, by midway through, a lot of times we're like, yep, Truex is winning it. You don't have Truex, no money. Like, you could already kind of tell what's going on. There's not a lot of action. A lot of them.
There are two types of the intermediate tracks. There's the multi-groove and single grooves. Single grooves are just kind of boring. There's usually just one guy leading. Then there'll be caution. There'll be another guy leading. Some of the new car is supposed to help solve with, like, sometimes just clean air is just way too OP. So seeing them at least attempt to nerf dirty air or clean air, that could change things. But like there's also like the multi-groove tracks like Kansas, where those are actually some of my favorites, because you see more driver change, you see lanes coming in, and then of course like traction compound stuff.
Yeah, you have your
things.
In
Who
the end
knows how it will affect the new car? A lot of who knows being said this spot.
You have your nuances for each track, but in the end of the day, Kyle Larson's going to dominate most of those fucking tracks. Let's be real. Or at least if this was 2021, that's the race that Kyle Larson was just going to dominate the shit out of every single time, because he had the best car and he was the best driver, and it was the best combination of two things last year. So in terms of DFS, now that we kind of covered the different track types, I want to talk a little bit about our tools and philosophy for attacking tournaments versus, not necessarily tournaments. We might call it cash games or single entry contests or whatever. So one of the things that you have to really concentrate on is, just like all the, I find NASCAR the same as other DFS sports in the sense of the game theory part of it, right? There's going to be drivers that are going to show up 70, 80% of lineups because, it's Eric Almirola. He's cheap and he's starting, 35th, and his projection is just always going to be incredibly high. The mean projection. Those guys, you have to make a decision most of the time. Hey, do I want to go all in on this guy who is in a clear, as long as he doesn't crash, he will be in the nuts kind of situation? And I just want a general take from both of you guys. So Brady, when you're in a situation where you've got a driver, he's an obvious stud, he's underpriced and starting super far behind. So he's got all of the ingredients of having this amazing projection. He's good at this track. They mispriced him, whatever the hell's going on. But you also know he's going to be 70 or 80% owned. How do you attack those type of situations, Brady?
Yeah. So obviously it goes case by case. But in general, my strategy when it comes to those like obvious 60 to 70+% plays is I try to think and try to come up with as many reasons as I can not to play them. You know, like, oh, this could happen, this could happen, this could happen. And usually, like, if you can get to like 5 valid reasons, I'm aiming to be under. So, and it usually ends up being for every reason, let me drop down another 5 to 10%. That's usually where I start. But there is situations where it's just like, yeah, he could crash, but other than that, what's going to happen? You know, so it's really case by case. But I always start from, I want to be contrarian. It's like, you know, you always want to, you know, the prop, like people always bet overs. People want to bet things happening. So, you know, it seems so easy to pick Kyle Busch in the Xfinity series. I want to find a way where I don't have to pick Kyle Busch, because if Kyle Busch doesn't succeed, then I'm winning no matter what. And if he does, well, then it was going to be hard to succeed anyway. So I'm always looking for reasons to not play those guys, but there is situations where it's just like, I just can't come up with enough reasons why this isn't a good play.
That's like when Ty Gibbs was like starting in the back in trucks last year, or was it trucks or Xfinity? Where did Ty Gibbs dominate last year? But I was like, oh, this
Xfinity.
And underpriced, and it was like
at Daytona last year, he was $4,500 in his first race ever, and he won that race.
Yeah, that's right.
That was just free. Like, I was trying to think of is like, what if you run this race 100 times, what percentage of the time does he either make the optimal or just like score well, depending on what your goal is with the lineup you're making, and compare that to the percentage of times that he doesn't or he underperforms, and then compare that percentage mark with ownership and determine leverage based on that. And
that's a really good habit to get into, is start looking at everything as percentages. Like, what is the percentage? This goes for betting and fantasy. When you're looking at, like, what's the probability of this event occurring, and you can use that to determine your own betting lines and your own ownership goal targets and stuff.
And with the implied percentages they added last season to the research station, that helps make a lot of those decisions for you. You have like top 5, 10, top 20% odds.
I want to show
applying that to ownership projections is huge. I mean, ownership is still probably number one thing when it comes to daily fantasy NASCAR. I think it's more important than actually projecting how well a driver will do, honestly.
It's not just NASCAR. Ownership projections are the most important number across anything in fantasy and DFS.
And most players, especially newer ones, think that projecting fantasy points is the most important thing. And it's probably the number one misconception about the entire industry.
100%. I throw this question out there on my Twitter all the time because people always get it wrong. I'm like, what do you think is the most important? It's always ownerships. Knowing ownerships and leveraging them it's the example I give of the 100-person contest where you're flipping a coin. The only thing that matters is how many people choose heads or tails. That's it. If heads is going to be 70% owned, then you should always choose tails. You'll make money because
it's literally poker. Poker is like the most similar thing to daily fantasy, and you're not playing to like hit your hand necessarily. You're playing to beat the other people.
Or get wins when you can, because the wins pay out so much. But here's a really cool feature and I don't know if you guys who are watching this on the YouTube can see this, but the implied probability. So you get an implied win probability, but also an implied top 5. I love this stat, implied top 5 probability. So when you're trying to figure out how much Chase Elliott can I play, well, 40, where's he starting? Then B, 48% of the time, according to the odds, which aren't always right. And that's where subjectivity comes into play. He's got a 48% implied top 5 probability. So this guy is a very good driver. He's going to finish top 5 according to the odds.
Mid-tier, low-tier guys seeing, who has an actual chance to like especially with place differential on sites like FanDuel or tracks with very low laps. You're aiming for place differential. You look at, okay, I need X amount of place differential. Like, say if a guy's starting like 25th, you want him. Say at his salary point, you need him to hit like top 10 to be in the nuts or something. You can just see the implied percentage there, and it's usually pretty decent.
Nice. All right, let's wrap it up here, guys. A nice preview. I'm going to go real quick into some of the stuff to expect to see every week as a DFS Army subscriber for NASCAR. Of course, we have our cheat sheets, and you've got Taco and Brady, Larkin and Nilly all switching off. Brady will be here for all the races, doing sheets. Taco on the projections. Of course, the research station for every single slate. All the stats you need, practice times, everything's there, and really, really great information about the track type and how to attack it. And of course, we'll be doing podcasts for every single race, kind of breaking a lot of this stuff down. And finally, the domination station optimizer, where you could bring it all together. I'm just going to talk about optimization real quick for NASCAR. We don't have any slates in here. I guess I could throw in an old one.
I'll say if there's qualifying, you usually expect the DS to pop up roughly 30 minutes after qualifying. And I think the shortest turnaround window that we'll really have is like an hour and a half in trucks, Xfinity maybe to 2 hours. So you always have at least an hour to work on lineups, with the exception of like upcoming Clash this weekend and I think Bristol Dirt. And I think those are the only times this season where we'll have like the pre-race heats, and it's a whole debacle there, but at least with those like with those starting positions slowly trickling in rather than just kind of all coming at once, you should be able to like we've done this with Eldor in the past. We've always been able to get it up with at least like 30 minutes to go. I think the closest they ever came was like when they had qualifying literally like 15 minutes before the start of the race with the NASCAR thing. But even then, we still managed to get up to the point where you could at least run something real quick.
I remember that, and there's always something. And of course, so my two things with the Dom station, I just want to I'm going to brief this, and we'll go over this on individual races. But there's just a couple of important things to be aware of on the domination station. One is the dominator rule. So as the user, different races have different approaches. We already talked the super speedways where we almost want to avoid dominators or cars starting up front that could be in the lead for a little bit. The flip side are the short tracks where you want 2 or 3 drivers that you think have a chance to lead the race for long periods of time. So one of the options we have is to allow stack at least 1, 2, 3 dominators in your lineups. What that will do is it will force 3 drivers with the dominator box marked yes. So as the user, we also can decide who the potential dominators are to mark as yeses. And we'll talk about this ahead of every race. Again, sometimes we want force 0 dominators. So we might actually make a group of drivers that we call dominators, but we actually those are drivers we don't want in our lineups or something like that. Actually, we would just uncheck those guys. Or
I usually make that rule manually in the I call it the shitter rule.
They're all, you can use this rule for a lot of different things. I like for NASCAR, I would do for like a plate race, for example, I would do at most one, right? So this is what I use for a Daytona, no more than 1. Basically saying if you're starting top 10, based on our research, we've never really seen a Daytona end where 2 guys who started in the top 10 were in the winning nuts lineup. So
the worst we've seen is 3 in the top 15 a few years ago, the 500. But that's rare.
It was rare, and those guys were 12th and 14th also. So there was like an 8th. It wasn't like you got 1st, 3rd, and 5th. It was like,
and just know by default. By default, usually the pre-marked yes dominators are always going to be your guys starting in the top 10 that are capable of leading laps. So I'm probably not going to have, like, say if Justin Haley Ramley qualified 9th, he's probably not going to dominator mark. And then I'll mark guys if they start like top 15 and there's someone like Kyle Blarson or something. But you can have guys that start in the rear that are dominators. Like say you get someone's practice time or qualifying time that didn't go through, but it's like Chase Elliott starting 30 something. It's not marked dominator by default because, you know, a lot of races you need those guys that will start up there like early on, and usually place differential always comes in like really highly projected anyway. But it's ultimately up to you. I highly recommend customizing the DS with your own takes at any given moment, and honestly bumping up the people that are super under projected, maybe knocking down people that are over projected just based on your takes, because they're pretty generalized projections where you can kind of assume that most other optimizers in the industry will be kind of somewhat near what they are. They're not as good as ours, but in the ballpark.
Don't sell these projections short, Taco.
I'm saying like other people's optimizer stuff, of course, they'll matter for ownership. So if there's someone that's like well under projected just by default, like say William Byron there in this one, no one's like, if you're in like a mini max or something, a big optimizer contest, ain't no one gonna play him. That's where you would those guys might actually have like some hidden value or something. But in like a single entry, they're probably gonna be overowned because people are dumb.
One thing I would suggest to guys, because we have the back test in place, is between now and when you're getting started with NASCAR for real, do a little bit of back testing, right? You can go to all of last year's races.
That might not be the best time to back test, but
I mean, it's unfortunate that we're
good. If you're going to a track the second time this season, it's a great tool to go.
I think it works anyway, more for a philosophical approach. I always think back testing is good. It's not. I understand we got new cars
comes in,
but the tracks play the same in the sense of, listen, how much ownership exposure should I give to guys who are like, all right, this guy is projected for ownership for 42%. What happens if I automatically, like when I'm back testing, I back test repeatable things. Like I might go, you know what? Let me take the highest projected ownership guy and just remove him and see what happens. If I do that over the course of an entire season, or, those kind of approaches, how do my lineups look when I use one unique, when I use two, when I use three, just randomly, just going after it. And by the way, sometimes you just want to see what won a race last year. And that's really easy to produce, because if you change this to final fantasy points, now I will tell you exactly what won. What was this? The Phoenix Championship. And here it is. It was Chase, Reddick, Almirola. It only spent 48.2. It did not spend. This might not even actually been produced, this lineup, but a lineup that only spent 48.2. What the hell happened in this race, guys? By the way, fucking Phoenix Championship must have been some carnage, because look what won it.
I think also I don't think we've talked about this yet, but this season, so the last two seasons, we've had DraftKings pricing according to the algorithm decided qualifying order that they knew where people are going to be starting. And I do believe that this season with the qualifying, we're going back to how it was 2 seasons ago, where people are priced based on their odds pre-qualifying, and qualifying is going to create a lot more of these situations where guys will stick out like a sore thumb. We'll see more massive ownership in things like the Cup Series.
Yes, I didn't even think of that.
If a guy started in 30th, like if you had Eric Almirola starting 35th last season, he would be priced up to 8, almost 9K or something, as where he would be like low 7K if they didn't know that and you didn't know where he was going to qualify. So
maybe that had
quite different.
Maybe that had a big effect on why a lot of those punt plays last year just failed.
That's why I would kind of take it with a grain of salt, because I recently used that backtest tool to see how often like true punts came through, and the answer was about 5 times throughout the season, and it was almost always the guy who was like bare minimum price in order to get like certain, well, most of the time Larson's in there with the salary cap with the other dominators.
Do you think part of the reason for that was when Killa Priest was put to the back last season, or starting really far back, all of a sudden?
Not even Killa Priest. Guys like that really actually, I think we had those kind of guys sort of like overrated in a sense, where if you're going to punt, you might as well punt all the way in the rear. It's kind of what
I'm thinking from last year, Taco, what might have counted that was they would raise
the fact that the qualifying was like considered into the pricing.
Yeah. So Killa Priest, when he was starting in the back, he wasn't 5K, he was 7,300. I think that's what did it. Like you get the 5K version. Maybe that. So maybe we'll see a return to the ability to like do exactly what you just said after qualifying. It's like, oh shit, this guy, McDowell, or one of these guys who when they're starting in the way back, all of a sudden they'd be priced at 6,500, 7K. But now we'll get their 5K cheap versions of those guys starting in the way backs so that we can actually use them and gain the advantage that we had been gaining in 2020 and 19 and 18, or 19 and 18 much more so, before before they were being priced knowing their starting position. Now we will go back to
especially the lower series, because
we're not going to know.
When they first added those lower series and they had the pricing before qualifying, a lot of the time, the qualifying is right before the race. Usually the guys that pop the most, like the top few plays, maybe similar to like, the news plays in NBA or something. Those guys are always like over-owned and just highly concentrated on where that like second tier of pretty decent plays, or even like some guys that just go under projected overall, their ownership gets so incredibly low, especially in like optimizer contests like the mini max. That's kind of a huge angle you can attack this season, honestly. If you just go a little bit, not too crazy with the contrarianism, but just like maybe not dumping everything into the most obvious of plays in those series, that could probably be very profitable long term.
Or going the opposite and just going all in on those spots and being like, fuck it, I'm going all in.
Unless you're going against Kyle Busch in trucks, which that would actually, I don't think you have to worry about that anymore, right? He's retired from lower.
Hopefully he's out of that. I hated making the Kyle Busch in trucks race decision at any time anyway. It was not.
I hated how it reduced the options. Like there are just so many ties whenever Kyle Busch would be in the field.
It's not a fun. It's not a fun approach. It really isn't. So
parity is always better.
Final thoughts, guys. NASCAR 2022, Edge, all of that. Brady, any final thoughts before we, we'll be back later on in the week to talk about the Clash, but any final thoughts overall?
Yeah, 2 really quick. Don't tie yourself to any result, whether you're doing fantasy or sports betting. The variance in NASCAR is insane, and like especially on the sports betting side, if I lose 80% of my bets this year, I'm going on vacation at the end of the year because it was a good year. You've got to lose a lot. Where you're betting on plus 2,000, plus 3,000 on very high hold markets. So do not tie yourself to any result. Be prepared to lose a lot, but the wins are very sweet. 2, maybe I'll save it for the Busch Clash show. I have a couple leans here. I'll give one out.
We'll save that. We're going to save.
We'll talk about that in a bit.
Yeah, specifics we're going to save for a real, let's talk about this race podcast, not an overview. So, Taco, any thoughts on the season as a whole? What to expect?
Yes. First off, patience. As I said earlier, Research Station, I love it. That's my baby. It's incredible, but calm down on it. Do not look at numbers from last season, previous years. You can a little bit at places where there's driver skill expression, but like the first intermediate race of the year, like you go into a freshly repaved Atlanta, you're not going to be looking for numbers to get an edge. You're going to be looking at ownership. Just think about ownership. It's so important. People are going to, projections are going to be made off of who knows what data, honestly. And like I said, you're not going to find meaningful data until like multiple months into the season. So patience with that. And just play it smart. And I would honestly ease bankroll in. Please do not dump like as much money into this Clash race as you would a normal race. Please, God, no. The thing is going to be we're going to have clusterfuck after clusterfuck to start the season.
I love that last part. Be a little careful the first couple weeks, guys. These are super speedways with mass amounts of crashing. Okay.
Well, Daytona, I'd say let it go at Daytona because it's Daytona. But I mean, overall, just we got it. It's kind of a wait and see approach. I know there may be,
give us a month to figure it out.
It seems like edge, but even a month, it's like you have to get to like the second or third month of the season to even see a track that you can use, a track that has been ran previously, to like look at it, just because they really screwed us with the schedule as far as like they wanted to try every different track type first before they repeat one. So let's see how it goes.
So in the years that I've been doing NASCAR, it's gone like this, and I'll just give you the pattern. It went Kevin Harvick dominating everything, Truex dominating everything, Busch dominating everything, Larson dominating everything. So one one consistent thing that I have noted over the years is at some point a driver tends to emerge every season that is just generally
usually at a track type.
Yeah, it's just
like Larson took everything, and he took everyone's lunch money at the intermediate tracks last season. While Hamlin didn't do much, but Hamlin was constantly feasting on the short tracks. Maybe a bit less so because they're at the different like horsepower packages and stuff this season.
If you want your candidates for breakout, I would keep your eye on Tyler Reddick and Chase Briscoe. Would be my.
I was about to say the same thing.
Yeah. Love it.
I was going to ask you, Brady, if you had a handful of guys you're bullish and bearish on, whose stocks are up and down. Of course, I think we both agree Reddick is going to rise tremendous. He could hit 5 digits by the end of the season, I think.
Absolutely. I think Reddick is a good call. I think Chase Briscoe will be the lead horse at Stewart Haas before too long. I would say I'm more bullish on Keselowski than the market seems to be.
At least initially, yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Bearish. I think Chase Elliott will have a lot of success this year, but I think he might be a little overvalued coming into the season. I think we saw his dominance on road courses diminish a little. And with the inclusion of AJ Allmendinger and Austin Cindric, I think a lot of that domination goes away.
I'll say the same thing, honestly, even though I love my mans.
Yeah.
He definitely takes a bit. The first half of the season is usually pretty non-existent. And then there are all these new road course drivers coming in, Cindric and AJ, that'll really test them. Even Briscoe's good.
Taco, you can make money if you back test an entire season and just uncheck Chase Elliott for the whole season. I feel like that's just a money-making way of doing it.
As long as you skip the road courses, I guess, sure.
No, it's okay to lose those. I'm saying like
his ownership actually got pretty low towards the end of the season, which is something we hadn't seen in seasons past.
I felt like he's always too highly owned, no matter what the situation. It's always like it's not a good for. He's always 27%. He's always 25. He's always too high owned, in my opinion.
I do that with Harvey, can make way more money.
Yeah. Oh, well, last year. So yeah. I mean, on that same tip. So yeah. Any down on them drivers? You said maybe Chase a little bit.
Maybe really Chase. Maybe Denny Hamlin. I think Denny Hamlin relies a whole lot on data, and there's just not a lot of data.
He's also got a new team to manage.
Exactly. He's spread pretty thin. He's a guy that uses the Dartfish data a lot, which there isn't a lot of. I think that'll hinder him a little bit.
But as data comes in, could be a strength for him in the future.
Exactly. I think towards the end of the year,
a data-oriented game.
Wait. Odds of you guys starting to adapt the nicknames that I come up with for these drivers. 1 to 10 odds. If
Killer Priest is 10 out of 10. That was a great
Killer
one.
Priest is a good one, right? D.Ham, not your favorite.
Yeah, you will never catch me saying that.
What was your one for Briscoe?
Donnie Briscoe.
Yeah. Donnie Briscoe. That's all right.
I'll also add Joey Logano. I think the departure of Keselowski will be a bigger deal to that
J-Lo.
team than I think is
J-Lo.
Yeah, J-Lo. I'll give you J-Lo. I think the departure of Keselowski to that team will be a bigger deal initially than is being made out to be.
Yeah.
Logano, a good thing for him or a bad thing?
I think he'll struggle. I think Keselowski was largely the lead horse there that was responsible for a lot of the setup notes and stuff. And I'm not sure how naturally Logano will take to being kind of the A driver especially with 2 young drivers behind him.
Christopher Bell, does he emerge as a stud this season on the level with the Harvicks and Truexes of the world?
Flip a coin. I think he has to. If he doesn't, Ty Gibbs is taking his lunch. But I think I lean. Yeah, I think you can probably circle 3 races or 4 races that I think Christopher Bell will be in contention to win at.
He seems to like certain tracks that just kind of be non-existent in a lot of others.
I think this car will benefit him
developing.
Too.
Yeah, I like Christopher Bell is one of those guys that I always want to play him because he'll all of a sudden just dominate and be awesome a couple of times a year.
Under-expected price in the Clash, at least. So, I mean, a lot of it depends on how DraftKings evaluates some of these guys.
Absolutely. If he's 10K, I'm not interested. But I like it when he's 8K, but driving
he was way overpriced at the tracks everyone knows he's good at, and then just neglected otherwise, which is honestly.
If he doesn't perform this year, he's done with Gibbs. So it's one of those. How does a driver react to that kind of pressure?
A lot of pressure. Will Willie Byron always start top 5 and we just can't play him another season?
Very
was
bullish
like an
on William
algorithm
Byron.
thing. Yeah, William Byron is really good, and he's definitely one of like the. He's very like data oriented as well. Good at researching for like newer tracks and new things.
I
definitely like
predicted
his
last
stuff.
season, maybe on this show, I don't remember, but that William Byron would have 10 wins last year. I picked the wrong Hendrick driver, but
Oops.
I will bet.
Whoops.
Like I think he can have a lot of wins this year. I guarantee nobody has turned more
'Cause
laps in the simulator than him.
He came second to Larson a lot of the time. He was second down a lot of the time.
Yeah,
But
so
then his
I'm
price
very bullish.
eventually just made him unplayable.
There we go. All right, guys, let's wrap it up. Listen, if you're not signed up for DFS Army, NASCAR, or you're finishing up NFL, you're like, I don't know what I want to do. We've got a really cool deal going on here. NASCAR 2022 promo code. It gets 50% off our NASCAR only membership for the first month or week or whichever one you sign up for. So we do an only NASCAR if that's what you want to do. You get the Discord. You'll get the cheat sheets from all of our team, Brady and Taco and Nilly and Larkin, all doing cheat sheets. All FanDuel, DraftKings, Super Draft. We don't forget about Super. We love Super Draft. Super Draft's my bitch. I make Super Draft my bitch this season. That's how I do it.
My bitch.
Fucking go Dave Portnoy in Super Draft. Grab the neck, squeeze it.
Jesus.
Okay then.
Sorry.
Jesus.
Sorry, I took it too far. I took it too far.
Well, okay.
I
Take a
took
step
it-
back here.
Yeah, sorry.
He's from Brooklyn. He's from Brooklyn.
Yeah, sorry, took it too far. But we've got it all. We've got it all covered. So you can sign up just for a NASCAR membership. Check it out. Use NASCAR 2022. You'll get all the notes, all the good stuff. I can't wait for the season to start. Podcast. We're gonna be hanging out a lot, boys. So get used to this face. Get used to this crew. We got a great season ahead of us. My goal is top 10 ranked NASCAR DFS, man. Go back to it. Get it again. Recapture that top 10 ranking. And it starts with Daytona, not the Clash, Daytona. I don't treat the Clash like a serious race.
Yeah. We'll still win it. Who cares?
Yeah, I gotta
it's
take it
always
down.
on top. It don't
Playing
matter
it.
the race.
Playing it, taking it down to the top. And I do hope if DraftKings is out there listening, that you guys put up like a $5 contest too. I need one in the middle. Okay, they got $1. They've got like a 15. They got $1. I want a $5 contest this year. I want a big flea.
Give us some big lug nuts.
I need no. Lug is only $4 entry. No. Big flea.
That was the 5. I thought lug was
Is that the 5? Is that what they call the 5?
Was the 4.
Oh, the lug. Yeah, that's right. The flea is as the NFL name of it.
I say more slings, less chromes. That's just me. Bring back those 200 max slings. Those are my shits.
I just like I like to max enter, but I don't necessarily always want to put in $3,000 to max enter the contest.
Especially in a top heavy one,
Oh yeah. But overall, these are very winnable. I don't think I've ever experienced a NASCAR race where I wasn't in first place for some period of time. It is heartbreak. It is euphoria followed by misery, followed by euphoria sometimes, but oftentimes more misery. It's great.
Most of the time finishes with the helmet on top.
There
are more helmets on top than any other company's avatar last year in NASCAR, that's for sure.
Everybody who plays NASCAR on DraftKings and FanDuel has already seen it. They've observed it.
They're sick of our helmets.
They're sick of the helmets. They're like, fuck those helmets. Well, can't beat them. Join them. Come be part of the team, and you will put your helmets up top. You know how many times last season we saw 5 DFS Army helmets tied for first place in the same race? That happened multiple times. It's unheard of. So that kind of thing just does not happen. We have screenshots of it. It's crazy. That will continue to happen. I'm going to try to play every race. Every race. I love it. And the fact that you guys are telling me maybe less carnage, maybe less variance, even better. The one thing that got me every time
in the championship race where we just had the optimal as the winning lineup.
Optimal
a few times already.
Happened more than once. Took down a number of these. And I like those contests. They need to make them a little bigger. So we'll see how it goes this year. I couldn't be more excited though, gents. So let's wrap it up there. Taco, Brady, Geek, good luck this DFS NASCAR season. DFS Army members, we can't wait to crush these tournaments with you guys. And of course, we'll be back in a couple days talking about the Clash. So we'll see you then. Deuces.